It's strange how the smallest things, the tiniest, most ordinary choices, can become the things that burn the deepest scars. It started with something simple. Just a favor. A little thing, really. You ever say yes to something, not because you wanted to, but because it felt easier than explaining why you were falling apart inside? That was me. I didn't think much of it at the time. It was just my stepson's friend, asking for a little help. A ride. A quick errand. Something small. Something innocent. But if I close my eyes right now, I can still feel the weight of that moment pressing on my chest. The air that day was thick, like it knew. Like the universe had paused to watch what I'd do. And I didn't walk away. I didn't say no. I said, sure. I don't mind. Just like that. And that one little favor? It took a turn I never saw coming. You know, I used to think that betrayal wore a stranger's face. That the kind of damage that ruins your soul came from people you barely knew. But what if I told you? Sometimes it's not strangers who break you. Sometimes it's someone you trusted. Someone who smiled like family and looked at you just a little too long. That's what this story is. Not about lust. Not about drama. Not even about right or wrong. It's about being seen in a world that forgot how to look. It's about a woman who was tired of being invisible, who made a choice she never thought she'd even consider. And the storm that followed when the line between comfort and danger blurred. If you've ever felt unseen in your own home, if you've ever stared at the ceiling at 2 a.m. wondering when you stopped being someone to someone, then you'll understand. Because this story? It's not fiction. It happened. To me. And I'm not proud of it, but I promise myself, if I ever told it, I'd tell it all. No filters. No lies. Just the truth. So, if you're still with me, and you want to know what really happened the day my stepson's friend asked for a little favor, then stay. Listen. Feel every word. Because this isn't just a story. It's a confession. And it starts right here, right now. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold, because here, we don't just tell stories. We unravel the human heart. I've lived in this house for almost 20 years. 2 stories. Beige walls. A backyard just big enough for cookouts and lonely mornings with coffee. It used to feel full. Now it feels still. Not peaceful. Just still. My husband works long hours. Longer than he used to. He leaves early. Comes home late. Always tired. Always somewhere else, even when he's sitting right beside me. We don't fight. We don't talk much either. And that silence, it crept in slowly, like fog curling under the door. He used to touch my back when he passed behind me. Used to bring me my favorite pastries after work. Used to ask how I was doing. Now, we just exchange nods. Schedules. Grocery lists. I told myself it was normal. That after years of marriage, things settle. Love matures. But what no one tells you is how love, left unchecked, can harden into routine. How it can start to feel like background noise. And in that silence, I tried to make do. I cooked, cleaned, took care of everything, held the house together like thread in old fabric. And then there was my stepson. 19. Tall. Quiet. He's always been polite. A little distant, but sweet in his own way. I raised him since he was 10. He calls me mom when no one's listening. Still does sometimes. But at this age, he mostly keeps to himself. Friends, phone, life beyond these walls. Which I understand. I do. One of those friends was Eric. He was over a lot. Always laughing. Always with that boyish grin like he knew he could charm the pants off anyone. Literally and figuratively. He helped out around the house more than most. Carried groceries inside. Took the trash out without being asked. Always noticed when something needed fixing, like a loose cabinet or a jammed sliding door. He paid attention. Not just to the house, but to me. He'd say things like, "You always make the house smell amazing." Or, "You should smile more. You've got one of those calming faces." At first, I brushed it off. I mean, what was I supposed to do? Tell a 20-year-old boy to stop being kind? But kindness started to feel different. The way he lingered when we spoke. The way his eyes held mine, just a little too long. He was charming, helpful, charismatic. And something about him made me feel not old, not forgotten. He made me feel present, seen. And it's embarrassing how quickly I noticed that difference. How quickly I started to expect his compliments. How easily I could pick out the sound of his laugh, even when he wasn't in the same room. I used to love the quiet, the stillness of this house, the routine. But somewhere along the way, that quiet started to feel like abandonment. Like I'd been left behind in a life that kept moving around me. And there was Eric, offering help with a smile. Every single time. But I started to wonder, was there something behind that smile? Was it just good manners? Or was it something else entirely? It was a Saturday. One of those days where the sun warms your skin just enough to make you forget whatever's been sitting heavy on your chest. I decided to host a little cookout, something light. Just a few friends of my stepson, some grilled food, folding chairs, music low in the background. I needed the distraction. Something to fill the silence that had been echoing louder in the house these past few months. My husband was there at the start. He flipped a few burgers, nodded through small talk, kept checking his phone. Then, as expected, he slipped away before dessert. "Conference call," he said. Didn't kiss my cheek. Didn't say thank you. Just grabbed his laptop bag and vanished into the house like smoke. I didn't even look up when the door shut behind him. I'd learned not to. The boys stayed behind. Laughing, teasing, joking around like young men do when they're trying to impress each other. But Eric, he wasn't loud. He wasn't showing off. He was watching me. It wasn't obvious, not in a way you could call out. Just enough to notice. Enough to feel. Later, when the plates were empty and the sun had dipped low behind the trees, the others started heading out. One by one, they tossed out their trash, thanked me for the food, said their goodbyes. All except Eric. He lingered. Said he'd help clean up. Took the dishes inside without being asked. Ran the water, rinsed everything like he lived there. I tried to wave him off. Said I had it under control. But he just smiled and said, "You've done enough today. Let me help." There was something in the way he said it. Not just polite. Not just grateful. Something warmer. He stood close when we dried the dishes. Too close. Close enough for me to feel the heat from his arm, the soft scent of his cologne. I didn't move away. I told myself it was nothing. Just a moment. Just proximity. Then he said, "You always look nice in the evenings, relaxed." I froze. My hand still in the dishwater. I didn't know what to say to that. Not because I was shocked, but because a part of me liked hearing it. I hadn't heard anything like that in years. Not from my husband. Not from anyone. I tried to change the subject. Talked about the garden. The weeds. The soil that needed turning. He looked at me and smiled again. "I could help with that. If you'd like. I'm good with my hands." There was a pause between those words. A pause that didn't feel accidental. A pause thick enough to wade through. I said yes. And I shouldn't have. Because that's how it started. With a garden. With soil seeds. And something growing that never should have bloomed. After that day, something shifted. Not in the world, no. The sun still rose. The dishes still piled up. My husband still left before I woke. And came home after I'd already folded into sleep. But inside me, something cracked. And in the space where nothing used to grow, where numbness lived, something stirred. Eric started coming by more often. Once a week turned into twice. Then it was just, whenever he felt like it. He'd say it was to check on the garden. But he never brought gloves. Never touched a tool unless I was right there beside him. And I didn't stop him. I told myself it was innocent. That I was being ridiculous. That I was just lonely, not lost. But if I was being honest with myself, really honest, I knew what I was feeling wasn't just loneliness. It was hunger. A deep, aching kind. Not for touch, not for romance, but for recognition. I missed being seen. Not glanced at. Not nodded at in passing. Seen. And Eric, he saw me. He'd noticed the way I tucked my hair behind my ear. He'd compliment the scent of my lotion. He remembered how I took my coffee. He laughed at my tired jokes. Looked me in the eye and really listened. And it made me feel, God, it made me feel human again. And then came the guilt. Every time I heard my husband's keys in the lock. Every time I set his plate down on the table in silence. Every time I watched him fall asleep with his back to me. I'd wonder, was it betrayal already? Even if nothing physical had happened? And if so, whose betrayal was it? Eric's for seeing me like that? Or mine for wanting to be seen? There were moments I almost said something to my husband. Moments where I'd open my mouth, start a sentence, ask a question, and stop myself before the words escaped. Because what would I say? I miss how you used to look at me. There's someone who makes me feel like I exist? Would he even understand? Would he even care? I started counting the days between Eric's visits. Not out of excitement, but out of something much more dangerous. Anticipation. And then, eventually, dread. Because I knew how easy it would be. How simple it would feel to fall. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to stop myself anymore. After a while, I stopped pretending to be surprised when Eric showed up. Sometimes he'd knock, sometimes he wouldn't. Sometimes he came with a reason, a broken hose, a bag of mulch, a half-finished garden bed. Other times, he just showed up with coffee. Always the same order. 2 creams, 1 sugar. Just the way I like it. He'd smile like it was nothing. Like he hadn't been thinking about it. But I knew better. There's a certain kind of attention that doesn't feel accidental. And his? It landed like warmth on bare skin after a cold wind. Uninvited, but welcomed anyway. He started noticing the little things when I changed my hair. When I wore something different. When I added cinnamon to the cookies I baked from scratch, like I used to, back when someone cared enough to notice. You always smell like comfort, he said once. And I laughed. Too quickly. Too loudly. Because I didn't know how else to react when the walls of my life started breathing again. Then came the rainy day. One of those slow, heavy afternoons where the sky looks bruised and the air is thick with waiting. He came by with a potted plant, said it needed repotting. We stood in the garage with the door cracked just enough to let in the smell of wet earth. He talked. I listened. And somewhere in between the soil and the stories, he reached for my hand. Just a gentle brush of his fingers against mine. I didn't move. Didn't flinch. Didn't pull away. It was just a touch, right? But the silence that followed, it screamed louder than any argument I'd ever had. And I didn't tell my husband. Not because I forgot. Not because it didn't matter. But because a part of me didn't want to let the moment go. I told myself it was harmless. That nothing had happened. That I was reading too much into things. But I knew. I knew what I was doing. I knew what I was allowing. And I knew what I was craving. It wasn't about Eric. Not really. It was about how I came alive when he looked at me. How, for a few short minutes, I didn't feel like background noise. Like a forgotten appliance running quietly in the corner. The garden became an excuse. A place to meet. A place to linger. A place where silence didn't hurt, where it held possibility. He started staying later. Bringing stories. Jokes. More coffee. And with each visit, the space between us kept shrinking. Then, one afternoon, he made a request I didn't see coming. And everything after that, it changed the story I thought I was living in. It was a Thursday. The kind of day that passes without making a sound. Clouds hung low like they were too tired to move, and the whole house felt heavier than usual. My husband had left early, something about a client dinner across town. Said he wouldn't be back until late. Didn't kiss me goodbye. Didn't even ask what I had planned. I didn't have plans. Not really. I cleaned the kitchen. folded towels, watered the garden, the one Eric and I had started together. It was just supposed to be another quiet evening. Until I heard the knock. It wasn't loud. Just 2 short taps. Like someone asking for something they weren't sure they should want. When I opened the door, he was already halfway turned away, like he'd been about to leave. Eric. No coffee in hand. No smile. Just him. And something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. He stepped in without waiting for an invitation. Said he was just driving by. Said he didn't know why he came. Said it felt like he needed to. We stood in the living room. Not touching. Not speaking. Just breathing the same air, not knowing what to do with it. Then he said it. I think about you. Just that. Not I want you. Not let's do this. Just. I think about you. And my heart, it didn't leap. It didn't flutter. It sank. Because I had been trying so hard to pretend that this thing, this unspoken thread between us, wasn't real. That it was just in my head. That I could keep holding the line without ever crossing it. But now there were words. Now it lived outside of us. Now it had shape. And sound. And consequence. I should have told him to leave. Should have laughed it off. Should have reminded him that I was married. That he was my stepson's friend. That this wasn't a story anyone would survive. But I didn't. I looked at him. And I didn't say a word. Because silence, it can be just as loud as consent. And what happened next? I wish I could tell you it was soft. That it was love. That it was some grand, sweeping passion I had no control over. But it wasn't. It was desperate. It was raw. It was 2 people who didn't know what they were trying to fill. Just that they were both empty in the same places. It wasn't passion. It was something darker. Something I'll never name out loud. And once it happened, there was no undoing it. No rewinding. No justifying. No going back to before. That night, after he left, I washed everything. The sheets. The dishes. The pillowcases. The doorknobs. I scrubbed until my hands ached. Until my skin turned red. Until the smell of him was gone. But not even scalding water could touch what needed to be cleansed. The morning after, I stood at the sink like I always did. Same cup. Same mug. Same routine. But everything felt different. Off. I couldn't drink the coffee. Couldn't taste it. It just sat there, getting cold, while my thoughts looped like a broken reel. I didn't reach out to Eric. Didn't text. Didn't call. Didn't even breathe his name into the space of my mind. And he didn't reach out to me either. When I did see him briefly across the yard when he came to pick up my stepson, he didn't wave. Didn't glance my way. Just kept his head down like nothing had ever happened. But something had. Something irreversible. And the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was sharp. It cut into everything. I started walking around the house differently. Avoided mirrors. Avoided sitting in the same chair where it happened. Avoided the smell of certain laundry detergents and the sight of a shirt he had touched. It was like the house knew. Like the walls had seen too much. Like the light came through the windows a little too harsh now. A little too honest. I couldn't look at myself. Not in the hallway mirror. Not in the bathroom. Not even in the reflection of the toaster. And when my husband looked at me, I flinched. But the strangest part? That week, he changed. Suddenly, he was home earlier. He brought home Thai food, said he remembered I used to love the coconut soup. He sat beside me on the couch, put his hand on my knee like it was a natural thing, asked how I was feeling. And I didn't know what to do with that. It didn't feel like kindness. It felt like pressure. Like the universe was pushing all my guilt back into my throat. He kissed my cheek before bed. Said he missed me lately. And all I could think was, why now? Why now, when it was already too late? Then my stepson started asking questions. Nothing direct. Just odd little things. Have you seen Eric? He said he might come by. Did he? You haven't talked to him? And every time I lied. Every time I said no, my voice cracked just a little. Not enough for him to notice. but enough for me to feel like the truth was poisoning me from the inside out. I moved through the days like a shadow of myself. Tried to keep everything looking normal on the outside. But inside, everything was warped. Twisted. I couldn't meet my own reflection, let alone theirs. And every time I saw Eric's name pop up on my stepson's phone, my stomach turned. I had broken something sacred. And now it was everywhere. In the air. In the space between footsteps. In the silence between words. Some nights I lie in bed next to my husband, listening to the way he breathes. The rhythm. The steadiness. I used to find comfort in it. Now it reminds me how far we drifted without ever making a sound. I close my eyes, and the night with Eric comes rushing back, not as a memory, but as a presence. As something that sits in the room with me, uninvited, but not entirely unwelcome. I don't think it was about him. Not really. It was never about Eric. It was about the version of me I thought I'd lost. The woman who used to laugh without thinking. Who used to feel worth touching. Who used to feel alive. Somewhere along the way, I stopped recognizing her. I became the woman who made dinners no one complimented. Who folded laundry no one noticed. Who dressed up and still wasn't asked where she was going. And then someone did notice. And I mistook that attention for affection. That warmth for love. Maybe that's what made it so dangerous. It felt like breathing after being underwater too long. It felt like coming back to life. But what is life if it's built on the ashes of someone else's trust? I think about the vows I made, the home I built, the boy who called me mom when he thought no one could hear. And I wonder what I've done to all of it. Was it betrayal? Or was it desperation? I don't know anymore. I've turned it over in my mind so many times, the edges are smooth now. No answers left. Just echoes. Sometimes I tell myself I was just lonely. That it was one mistake. That it didn't mean anything. But it did. It meant I was willing to risk everything. Just to feel something again. And that's not nothing. I carry it now. Quietly. Carefully. Like glass tucked under my skin. And I still don't know, was I the villain in this story? Or just another casualty of a quiet marriage? Have you ever stood at a line, knowing you shouldn't cross it, and still found yourself on the other side? Not because you planned it. Not because you were reckless. But because something inside you whispered, just this once. Just one moment of being seen. Just one breath of something real. Was I wrong for what I did? Or was I just human, aching to feel seen again? Because I didn't go looking for it. Didn't dress up hoping